Jermaine Man Underwood coming back, and in this video I'm going to be talking about campaign world building. And in this class we're going to be talking about world history. That's right, that same subject you had in college and high school that your Mark ass took back in elementary school. And you'll remember in the back of the chapter there are always these 2-page spreads with a long line with lines coming up and down. It's called a timeline. And the timeline is so very, very important when we discuss world history in a game. Now remember, you want to have a game where your players actually can buy knowledge history and not get jacked for having bought that rank and that skill. It should mean a lot. It should mean a great deal, because history is the foundation upon which the believability of your world is built. When they wander around through those ancient crumbling ruins and you go, oh yeah, this is the Naxinari ruins, and you can see this faded out hieroglyphic-like language over here that is only slightly discernible from these oddly cut old rocks that are crumbling off of this structure. Yeah, this was once a great kingdom, thousands of years ago, from a race that has died out long before your race was even born. And what secrets do they have here to be explored? And the players, it's not about traps and treasure and monsters anymore. It's about finding something out, figuring it out, exploring this mystery. And it's always a mystery. And when you delve into those mysteries, you're going to really elicit a high level of attention and interest from your players. That's something that's really giving them a lot more than simply traps and treasure and monsters, which, a module written by a 14-year-old could give you. So those sort of details are the kind of details that building a world predicated upon its own history has. Now, you can use an Earth-based calendar, but you don't have to. You can use one that's wholly alien and interjects that alien vibe and influence into the game. And that can be something that's really fascinating in and of itself. And once you have that, you can even go forward into where you plan to take the campaign and outline on your history events that shall come. And not necessarily events that the players will even interact with, but they are shaping the world the players are in. And depending on the path the players lead, they could interact with those events or not. Yet you still have that background happening around the players. And that is so important when there's more on the stage than simply them. There's things going on behind the stage. There's a background. Things are happening in the audience. When you have all that going on, it really has that richness, that busy feeling. In a game that feels busy, man, the players are like, oh man, I want to do this and this and this and this and this. Oh, there's so much to do. You want your players to not be able to do everything, to feel that sort of rush. And having that history in there, having it planned out in the future also is a very good way of doing that. Now, once you have your calendar established, once you have, a history beginning to be built up, you have to put it out chronologically. When did this occur? Now we can keep a good degree of ambiguity there and say, okay, how did things happen? Well, you need to have a reality. This happened, so you know how things happen. However, there might be dispute between different races. Which race appeared first? Which god appeared first? Who won which war? Or even if a war occurred at all. These things are great to have, disputes. Oh, no, it was a dwarven hero that killed that god of evil. No, it was a lizard man hero. No, the hero was 3 kobolds. Stop trying to jack us just because we're kobolds. Come on. So they can really fuel, some interesting debate philosophically. And remember, truth doesn't necessarily matter. It's pride, esteem, that racial identity that these different entities are going to have. Now, on that timeline, there's a load of events, depending on the type of campaign you want to run, that you might want to put on that timeline. None of them are bad. You can put anything you like on there. However, I'm going to talk about a few things that I recommend putting on there. Races. When did the race first appear? That is so crucially important. Particularly if we go all the way back and say, okay, which race was first? Which one was first? Now, you might run a game where maybe 10 races showed up the same day, or, within a small period of time apart, 100 years or so. Going back perhaps thousands of years, that doesn't necessarily matter that much. But you might have a game where one race appeared and 10,000 years later, the next race appeared. both of those could certainly be valid, but they're going to tell a different tale, a story, and that's what history is. It's a telling of so many different tales, and getting involved with that sort of information. And when you have something like history really well developed, you might actually see players go, man, I want to play a bard, I want to play a sage, I want to play a scholar, and have that be very valid when they're working on making an archaeologist type character for your Dungeons and Dragons game. Doing something right, as long as you can deliver. And now, once you've designed when each and every one of your races appeared, when perhaps races that are now extinct, when did they appear? When did they die off? What other major events occurred? What important battles do we want to put on there? What wars do we want to put on this list? What other major events have happened? Has a god died? Has a mortal ascended to godhood or to some other form of minor divinity? Do we want to put that on? When were legendary kings or queens or various forms of rulers? When did they live? How was their rule? How did it affect other races? How did it affect their own race? When was the first city built? When was the first city that had allowances for multiple races built? Typically in a world of Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to see multiple races in a city. However, when those races came about, they weren't trying to get with that. Elves for elf cities, dwarfs for dwarf cities, humans for human cities, depending on when they come about, of course. That might have to change. Now, you also run into a very interesting thing when you start building these things together. You start adding so much flavor to your races, because if the dwarves just showed up like 15 years ago in your storyline, and there's dwarves, and I said jack to the dwarves because there are already 45 races of sentient individuals out there that build cities and have colonized everywhere, every island, every place. So where do the dwarves get in? Do the dwarves, through their hard work, find a place? Are the dwarves enslaved? Do the dwarves go, ha, we were shrewd, and roll through somebody that was unsuspecting of dwarves? Because how would you prepare for a race and it was just there? And of course, depends on how your gods create races, because they might, and they're just there, or they might come about a different way. So, and that could tell a really interesting story. Perhaps one race was of a god, and that race forsook their god. They angered their god. They blasphemed their god, and their god said, you eat a dick! And they make another race. And all of a sudden the race is just there. They're like, yeah, everything is straight them up for us. And the hand of justice is laid down in the form of a sort of attack they never suspected. Because how can you possibly prepare for an enemy that you had no idea even would exist? Because it didn't exist. So when you put all these sort of events onto a calendar, when you add this level of creativity and believability to your game, you really make players very interested in the campaign setting, in the believability of the game, in adding to that rich history that's occurred. So think about it. Think about your timeline and what needs to be on there. And that is going to create your world history.